those views up there for different cities as separate cards because they're kind of the same thing, right? We've also got something called Recycler View. If you're a developer, which I'm guessing from the looks on people's faces, a lot of people may not know start. If you're an Android developer, you remember using list view, and with list view, you have to do something called view recycling, which is a memory management technique. And in the app compatibility library, it gives you a way to do that, so it's less work. I'm going to show you an example of that, and that whole thing is available on GitHub. So if you remember, I was talking a minute ago about backwards compatibility. Here we've got two different API versions. One of them is Lollipop and the other one is not. And the difference being on Lollipop, we have the ability to style the action bar here. And then on 4.0, this is KitKat, you don't. But these are the exact same application, and they both got their theme the same way. You can see here on the front I've used card view, and then if we go to search, I'm using a recycler view for the list. And the way that was implemented I just lost it. How did that happen? Sorry. Cool. All right. Yeah, it's fine. You know what? Never mind that. I'm not sure if I can get that to work. I'd also like to show you some of the new patterns that are available in material design, at least that were suggested by Google when they released their design spec. We've got different kinds of buttons now. You remember previously they looked kind of like a little gray blob, and you'd press it, maybe it would darken it a little bit, you'd kind of depress it. Now we're supposed to use flat style buttons. They're called ink buttons. When depth already has meaning, so if you have a pop-up, you should be designing it as an ink button, because if you don't give that button elevation, it gives more attention to the fact that your pop-up is elevated, that your pop-up has a drop shadow. We also have something called floating action buttons, and you've been able to see these for a while in Google Maps, but it's being suggested as more of a pattern now. You can see them also in the email app when you go to add an email. These are meant to stay in place on the screen when the content underneath them is panning, like a map or a list view. They're supposed to span sheets of paper, and in design, the idea is that everything is a sheet of paper. So if you have, for example, you're writing an email and you want to add an attachment, you would slide up something that's supposed to look like a sheet of paper from the bottom, and you could have these floating action buttons that span between them that kind of bring the different pieces of paper together on the screen. Like I was talking about, this is a bottom sheet. On the left you can see something called a bottom sheet animating up to give you more options for creating something. We've also got something called the snack bar. And the snack bar is like a toast. If you have used toast before, those are a little dark square that pops up at the bottom of the screen. It fades in and out and has a little message on it. But sometimes we want them to last a bit longer. Sometimes we want the user to explicitly dismiss them. And so we would use something that's called a snack bar. Unfortunately, this is not available through a standard Google library. You need to get a third-party library to use it. The same goes for the floating action buttons, but I'm hoping that they'll be added in the new release. We've also got the ability to do transition animations. We can animate between fragments and between a view on an existing activity into a view in the new activity, and that's really easy to do even just in XML. You would just name the two elements in your view hierarchy, and then in Java, I showed an example, you would just tell it to use that transition, use those in your transition. Another tenet of material design is color. They say to use bold color. This is actually my least favorite part of the design spec, because the suggestion is that you would pick a certain number of primary colors and base the rest of your color swatch off of it. But I find primary colors don't always convey the message that you want. If you have a very serious application, like say it's something to science or banking, you don't necessarily want to use something that looks like a child's toy. If you do want to generate a material compliant palette, there's a website where you can do that. It makes it really easy. I'll show it to you in a minute. We also got a bit more reading here. Material.com is a collection of designs for your perusal and inspiration. It's got some really great examples of companies using this design language to create something that is very distinctive to them, something that doesn't look at all like a Google product, but instead looks like their own corporate branding, but it still has the same metaphor of light, of shadow, the same metaphor of paper. What's next for Material? I've been internet stalking Matthias Dart, but he hasn't said. He also, he did point out the other day though that there has been a recent update to the spec, actually just 2 days ago. It's got specifications for how we're supposed to lay things out in tables, different ways to do measurement units, scrolling tab navigation. That just came out, it was kind of fun. We still don't have as strict a design specification as Apple's human interface guidelines, but I think that's good. I think one of the really fantastic strengths of the Android platform is the fact that so much is left up to the developer to decide. And this is, I think, a good step in making the platform consistent for those who want to be, but the fact that we're allowed to deviate from that design is really valuable, and I hope we don't lose it. Again, my name is Christa Mabee. I'm on Twitter. The app that I was going to show you that I had trouble with is available on GitHub. It has like a really bare bones implementation of material designed for different elements, such as lists and cards. And so I asked you a question at the beginning of the presentation to think about, is like how does the native look and feel of an application contribute to the user's trust? And so at this point, I'd like to open up the floor and hear anything that you have to say. We can talk about that. We can talk about material design. We can talk about anything else that you guys want to, really, like women in technology. I don't know. Thanks.
Hi there. You mentioned the primary color selection may not be conducive to trust amongst users for things like financial or science institutions. Do you think that once material design is more widespread, the average user base will be more used to that sort of behavior, it will then become appropriate? Or do you think that from an institutional point of view, those institutions will say, no, we want to keep a certain type of image and interface?
I see it becoming more widespread in applications that I wouldn't think have ever done that before. I've seen my own bank has adopted a very, very bright, cheerful color palette that's not in line with their corporate branding. And so I know people are doing it. I don't know that it's necessarily good. I don't know that it'll have the effect on their users that they're hoping it will. But there is something to be said for, bright, cheerful colors, even if you're doing something serious. I do think as this becomes more widespread, users will get used to it and be a little bit less off-put by it. I showed my dad an application the other day, and he was like, "That looks like a child's toy," and I was like, "Yeah, it does. Sorry." So I think attitudes will always be diverged a little bit, but it's definitely becoming more and more sort of a corporate standard to use these kinds of colors.
Thank you. And the other question is, how long do you think material design will be around for? Is it a long-term thing, or in 2-3 years' time are we going to all have to redesign our apps to suit another design redesign?
Well, if you take an example from iOS, like they've had a very similar sort of skeuomorphic design language for their entire history. The past 2 years have seen it flatten out a lot, but not completely. So I think now that Google sort of has a standard, they'll probably stick to it for a good long time.
Great, thank you.
Do you think it's a good idea to use like material design on a pre-5.0 devices? I mean, it's like nice you have like the app looking the same on all devices, but those that do not come with material design. Does it confuse the user maybe more than it brings us?
I don't think it's going to confuse the user at all, mostly because so many applications are adopting it, and also it's not a confusing design language. It's really simple and it's easy, and it renders well on older devices. Like I said, the Compatibility Library lets you go back to the beginning of Android. And so Google's own applications have already been updating as well. Like if you have an older device and you look at Google Maps, you can see the elements of material design coming in there. So if the user is using Google's applications like Gmail or Maps, then they've already seen it.